When you hear the title, Security Engineer, what do you actually picture? Is it some kind of digital architect, designing these incredible, impenetrable fortresses of code? Or is it something a little less glamorous? Today, we're going to dig into one of the most critical roles in all of tech to answer a pretty simple question. Is a security engineer a master builder, or are they kind of just a glorified janitor? Let's peel back the layers and see what's really going on.
So, in a perfect world, this is the person who builds the defenses for our entire digital lives. They're supposed to be the proactive visionaries, right? The architects who lay a rock-solid foundation of security before a single bad guy even thinks about knocking on the door. The whole idea is that they don't just react to problems, they design systems where those problems can't even take root in the first place.
And hey, this isn't just a vague idea, there's a formal definition for it from the legendary security expert Ross Anderson. It's all about building systems to be dependable. And you got to pay attention to the key words here: malice, error, or mischance. This role is supposed to handle everything, from a super sophisticated state-sponsored cyber attack, all the way down to a simple accidental typo in a config file. That is a huge and pretty noble mission.
Now, just so we're all on the same page, we are not talking about a security analyst here. The biggest difference is proactive versus reactive. The engineer builds the security infrastructure. We're talking firewalls, detection systems, the whole shebang. The analyst then uses those tools to watch for threats and respond when things go wrong. So the engineer builds the sword and the analyst wields it in battle. It's a really critical distinction.
Okay, so that's the blueprint, right? The ideal job description. But like with any job, what's on paper is one thing, and what you actually do every day can be something else entirely. So what's it really like down in the trenches? Well, this quote from a pro on Reddit just cuts right to the chase. Forget fighting hackers for a minute. Apparently, a massive part of the job is just internal friction, trying to convince your own coworkers and your own bosses to actually care about security. This isn't about writing code, it's about persuasion, communication, and office politics.
And if we break down what a typical week looks like, the reality gets even sharper. Check this out. Based on one engineer's real-world experience, a whopping 40% of their week is spent just tweaking and tuning the tools they already have. Only about a quarter of their time, the fun stuff, the actual threat hunting, gets done. And the rest, meetings, reports, and policies. It's a whole lot of maintenance.
And that brings us to what we could call the unseen grind. We're talking about the constant storm of alerts, and so many of them are false alarms. It's fighting for budget with executives who might not even get the risks. It's navigating the political minefield when you find a flaw in another team's project. It's the endless paperwork, the bureaucratic bottlenecks, and the soul-crushing task of explaining the same basic security concepts again and again and again.
So we've got this huge gap, right, between the architect we imagine and the grinder who's stuck in meetings all day. But why? Why does this gap even exist? What are the forces that are constantly pulling this job away from pure, cool engineering and into the muck of corporate life?
Well, based on some great analysis from security leader Rami McCarthy, we can boil it all down to 4 core challenges. Let's break these down because they explain so much about the friction these engineers face every single day.
First up, hiring. It is just incredibly hard to find people who are true experts in both software engineering and security. It's like finding a unicorn. This talent shortage means teams are always stretched thin, or they're forced to compromise. They hire someone who's great at one thing but kind of weak in the other, and that just creates a whole new set of problems down the line.
Next, you've got what's called the hammer and nail problem. You know the old saying, if all you have is a hammer, everything starts to look like a nail. Well, when you hire a team of builders, their first instinct is to build. They see a problem and they immediately want to architect some beautiful, custom solution from scratch. But a lot of the time, the company is already paying for a tool that could solve that exact problem in like 1/10 of the time. It's a huge resource strain.
And finally, there's the org chart itself. Security teams are often siloed off. They report to a different boss than the development teams they have to work with. And here's the key. The dev team is incentivized to ship new features fast. The security team is incentivized to stop risks. When those two goals clash, and believe me, they clash all the time, you get friction.
Okay, I know we've talked a lot about the grind. It sounds pretty tough, doesn't it? So why in the world does anybody do this job? Well, because buried under all that paperwork and all those politics, there is a payoff. A really profound, deeply satisfying moment that makes every bit of the grind worth it.
And I honestly don't think I have ever heard it put better than this. It's 95% janitorial work, but the other 5% is getting into a knife fight with a ghost in the machine and winning. That is just perfect. It's you versus a shadowy adversary, a battle of wits against a phantom in your network, and you win.
Just 5%. It's not a lot, is it? But that 5% is everything. It is the thrill, the high, that these engineers chase for their entire careers.
So what does winning actually look like? It might start with the tiniest clue, a single, almost invisible signal pinging back to an attacker's server, buried in terabytes of data. But you spot it. You pull on that one little thread, and the attacker's entire hidden operation starts to unravel. You trace them back, you expose all of their infrastructure, and then, methodically, you kick them out of your network for good. It's the ultimate digital detective story, and you get to be the hero.
So, if that sounds like a thrill you are willing to endure the 95% grind for, then the next question is, how do you get there? Let's quickly map out the path to actually becoming a security engineer.
Look, this is not an entry-level job. The most common way in starts with a solid foundation in IT. Think help desk or a systems administrator role. From there, you get some real experience, you grab a foundational certification like Security Plus, and then you often move into a security analyst role. That's where you really learn the ropes of defense and response before you make that final leap to architecting the systems yourself as an engineer.
And to make it, you're going to need a specific toolkit. On the skills side, you absolutely have to understand secure coding, network architecture, and how operating systems really work under the hood. And for certifications, you can see a pretty clear path, starting with something like CompTIA Security Plus and moving up to the more advanced SSCP and eventually the gold standard CISSP for those senior roles.
So in the end, yeah, the role of a security engineer is a total paradox. It is both the visionary architect and the pragmatic janitor. It's a job defined by the daily grind, by the meetings and the maintenance, but it's punctuated by these rare, amazing victories where you outsmart a real human adversary. So the real question isn't whether the job is one or the other. It's both. The real question is, for that 5% shot at glory, are you ready to hunt the ghost in the machine?